History of Well, welcome everybody. We're absolutely thrilled that you're here with us today at the Wheels Museum to hear an incredible presentation by Ronn Perea, sold out crowd and then some. As you all know, Ron was the head of the Comedy Club for 30 years. He has done tremendous research along with Dr. Sims for this presentation today. I think you're going to all have a wonderful time hearing him. We can't wait to hear him. After the presentation, certainly you are welcome to tour the museum. We hope you'll do that and have a lot of fun in here. This is a free event. If you wish to give a donation, that's fabulous. That's how we exist. But we're all volunteers. We're looking for volunteers. We are trying to save this site. We're trying to help Albuquerque with economic development, saving its history and culture. We've been doing it for about 30 years, so it's not a short process, but we're making great progress, and thanks to people like Ron and Tom and all of you who are here, we're doing it. So I love you all. Do you want to ask me anything before we start the presentation? Special question? No? Everybody knows everything? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, here is Ronn Perea.
Señores, señorinas, ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Come on, how are you? See, now that's good. I have something to tell you. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
Come on, are you up for it? Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I write historical novels, and as such, what you're going to hear today came natural to me. It will come natural to you. We're going to talk about Albuquerque from 1940 to 1979. 29 stories. Are you ready?
Yes.
Now, it's important that there's going to be a lot of good info that you're going to want to write down and retain. There's a lot of locations that you want to remember the addresses to. And there's a lot of good movies that you're going to hear about that you're going to want to go check out at the library. So be prepared to write all this stuff down. Okay?
Okay.
All right, I told you, didn't I? Okay. And this gentleman's going to help me with these photogs, Dr. Tom. And I'm happy to have him on my team, I promise you. Shall we get started, Tom? All right. You ever heard of this field?
Yep.
You know how we got that name? Okay, 1941. Ladies and gentlemen, Albuquerque had 5 private airfields around town. Did you know that? 5 for all these small planes. And I just found out yesterday where one I never expected. How many of you know where Hoffmantown Shopping Center is?
Yeah.
Right across the street of Manon was the Northeast Heights airfield. Can you believe that? Now it's houses. And so I was amazed to hear that. But the federal government wanted to buy the airfield that was here already, just so they can have a stop-off point. Flights that were going to fly from the East Coast to the West Coast, they needed a place to stop. And so they thought, as a second thought, they'd buy a field that was already here in Albuquerque. Little would they realize that in 1941, December 7th, afterwards they were going to be needing a field. So, guess what happened? You know, how many of you know this guy?
Major Kirtland.
Who? Say it loud.
Kirtland. Would he be Kirtland?
Roy Kirtland. He was a hotshot in 1920s into the 30s that developed America's air power from the biplane to the single wing. He died late 1930s. So, in his honor, they named this new field after Roy Kirtland.
Can you tell more
And
about
I think
biplane?
I should give him a free ticket to my comedy club, don't you think? And who is this guy? I give him a couple more tickets too, for that matter. He was the very first commander of Kirtland Airfield. 3 years into it, he decided that he wanted to go and fly missions in the South Pacific. And so, in his honor, what he was trying to do was build it, and he started building roads into the airfield. And so he built one big one out of the northeast out. And so they named, when he left, decided to name the road after him, Colonel Eugene Eubank. see how things are taking shape? Do I need to mention?
Stuart
You know
Bobby?
what? You know what they turned that field into? A training school for bombardiers and pilots. And in the first class, who was one of the? He's right there. He's sitting on the fence overlooking Kirtland Field. There he's just bullshitting with some of the other fellows. That is the Albuquerque Officers Club, 1944. They thought they'd hang out, party. Well, any of you know who that other guy is? Not? Who doesn't know? So I don't have to mention his name? You know why I have a special, me personally, a special appreciation for him? When he graduated from that school, he was obligated to do 25 missions. When the war was over, he had accomplished 52 missions. And so I have a special appreciation for that. So, anytime he has a movie out, watch it. All I got to say.
Is that a B-17
Yes. Bombardier. How many of you have heard of that movie? Remember, this is one of the movies you are to watch. It came out in 1943 about the bombing school in Albuquerque. They mention Albuquerque throughout the movie. Located, and it's, take it in. Good movie. Next. All right, guys. Here's a fact none of you knew. Did you know that during 1943 to 1947, Albuquerque was a home to an Italian prisoner of war camp? How many of you already knew that? Well, it was located between the zoo and Tingley Beach. And here's some of them right there. And show them eat. That's their breakfast. And guess who fed them? Who had the contract to feed them? The Alvarado Hotel. And so they took breakfast every morning to the camp. Now those, okay, now how many of you know 1944 to 1947, it was turned into a Nazi POW camp? How many of you knew that? So we were the home to a Nazi POW camp. The first thing the Alvarado Hotel did was cancel their contract. But here are them arriving. So, isn't that a kick in the butt? Next. All right, how many of you seen this movie? How many of you know who Ernie Pyle was? Ernie Pyle was World War II most famous Albuquerquean there ever was. Ernie, how many never heard of him? Raise your hands. Who has not heard of Ernie Pyle? Ernie Pyle, I'm going to tell you anyway. Ernie Pyle was an international news correspondent. He had articles in 300 daily newspapers. And he wrote specifically about your brothers, your sisters, your uncles. He did not write about colonels or generals or presidents or kings or queens. He wrote about the everyday fighting man. And that's how come he was so successful and everybody knew it. And got to the point where he started writing for newspapers in Europe. And 5 countries in Europe ran his articles. So he became a little bit world famous. And how many of you have been to his library, his home? In Albuquerque, South Girard, converted in, well, his story, sad, but when he came home between the Pacific and Europe, he had problems with his wife, who had emotional issues. He had no second thoughts about going to the South Pacific. And as you know, Ernie caught one in Okinawa, Japanese sniper. 8 months later, his wife back home stuck her head in their oven. A year after that, the city bought their home to convert it into the museum that it is today, Albuquerque's very first branch library. They were scheduled to open up on July 7th, 1947. The mayor was gung-ho. He wanted to cut the yellow ribbon, do speeches, because he felt, because of Ernie Powell being who Ernie Powell was, his name was going to be in every newspaper across the country. July 7th, 1947. What else happened that date? Nobody knows. Yeah, you will. The mayor got blown out of the water. Not even a speckle of black ink on any newspaper. Why? July 7th, 1947. You know what the headliners read? Roswell. You couldn't win against that. All right, 1945, June 3rd, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now I got to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. There were many espionage incidences at Los Alamos. Many. But this is the only one that they could pin down date, time, even though it was 103 degrees that day. Why? Nobody could pin down a specific time and date and place. So 209 North High Street was the place. Today, it is a home for traveling nurses, but it still stands. And if you go there, right there, it still says Spy House. And these were the spies. Except, how many of you have heard about the spies that got executed in Sing Sing prison in 1953? Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Brother to Ethel, wife. And so they got arrested in New York 5 years later, and the guy squealed on his own sister. And so that's how that went down. But if you go by 209 today, look, you'll see that Spy House sign. And it's still there. That's a kick in the butt, I say. Yes. Who doesn't know who this guy is? Okay, that guy is responsible for 2 major motion pictures that were shot in Albuquerque. One was in 1950. How many of you have taken a little quickie trip out to Route 66 Casino? You know how you have to go drive around Route Rio Puerto? There's a bridge that's there. That was a major prop in the movie Ace in the Hole, produced by that guy. See that? It's closed now. It was closed in 1959. But let me ask you why, if it was closed in 1959, does it still stand today? Tell me. You know why? That was a movie prop built by Kirk Douglas himself for the movie Ace in the Hole. So now today it belongs to the New Mexico Film Commission, not the highway. And so that's how come it still stands today. Good movie, Ace in the Hole. Remember, check it out. Oh yeah. How many of you been up there?
Oh, yeah.
February 8th, 1955. 8,000 feet high in the Sandia Mountains. Wreckage still stands. If you take up the tram at the 8,000 feet high, you'll still see the tail end protruding out of the mountains. But if you want to go take a look at it, it took them 8 months to clear it all of all the bodies because 8,000 feet high and it was frozen. The day it crashed, it was 10 degrees below zero. Next. Do I need to say what this is? All right. May 22nd, 1957. U.S. Air Force was making a delivery to Kirtland Air Force Base. And by now, most of you have heard what the base of the Manzanos is used for today. Correct? You all know. Raise your hand if you don't know. It is the inventory warehouse for the United States of America's nuclear warheads. And it's grown considerably since they opened it in 1947. And on May 22nd, 1957, a bomber was making a delivery to Kirtland Air Force Base. At the 18,000 square feet, it had air turbulence, knocking them down to 8,000 feet. It forced a major, they lost the bomb, okay? It took the bomb bay doors with it. And it hit ground at 8 seconds, it had a 15-second trigger. And so by 7 seconds, we're all here today. And that's what happened on May 22nd, 1957. You've all heard of this place? For the ones that were not born yet, it was the premier hotel in Albuquerque. And located over there at Tramway and, well, initially Tramway and Route 66. Eventually Tramway in Central. Anybody know who this one is? Okay, the next one.
Why did you need 3 slides of her?
Okay, she was at the Western Skies rehearsing for a movie called Only of the Brave. No.
That's Kirk Douglas.
No. She was here rehearsing a movie. And it was with Dean Martin, who was going to be playing her opposite. The movie was to be shot here in Albuquerque. So she was practicing some of the scenes while staying at the Western Skies Hotel. She hired a maid from the Western Skies to help her guide, make sure that the downstairs in the swimming pool area was free of any onlookers, especially of the male kind. And so every morning she took her practice swims. What they failed to recognize are all the guys congregating on the second and third levels. But that happened while she was here.
I'm giving everybody another run through the 3 picks.
Next. All right. Kirk is back. 1960-61. Lonely Are the Brave. This is an excellent movie. A contemporary cowboy movie. A contemporary western, black and white. The movie opens in with on his noble steed, trying to get into town, crossing Coors, and he can't get across because the cars are going shoot, 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 and he can't get in. Eventually he does. And throughout the movie, he eventually makes his way across Albuquerque, and eventually to the base of the Sandias. But if you guys want to see what Albuquerque looked like in 1960, long before urban renewal, long before everything was changed, that they showed it on film, black and white. Check it out. Excellent movie. That's at the base of the Sandias.
I heard that Kirk Douglas said of all movies he made, this was his favorite.
Yes, and that was validated by his son at his funeral when his Michael Douglas said, what was his favorite movie? Lonely Are the Brave. Their headquarters was at the Western Skies Hotel. They waited 3 months to start production because the original lead of the movie was going to be a fellow that would later die. So they waited for nothing, but it was going to be led by, how many of you remember the actor Gary Cooper?
Yeah.
And so he would die, and so Kirk had to take over. Next. Come on. Anybody know who this guy is?
Jimmy Morrison.
Say it louder.
Jimmy Morrison.
All right.
Sing it.
Say it louder. Sing it louder. What's the next one? That guy. How many of you knew that he was a 1962 graduate of Sandia High School? I'll have proof. Next.
That's a yearbook picture.
Sandia High School Yearbook 62. That was a jewel for me to find that one. Next. All right. Missiles of October. October 20th to the 28th. You know what was happening. These two guys were battling. Next. The blockade. This was a major battle with these guys. But if those missiles had been launched from Havana, what is right here?
Albuquerque.
next photo. And that's how come this happened. Windrock. Anybody here from Windrock? Windrock was 1 year old. And the largest department store in New Mexico was Montgomery Ward's. Why was it large? It had a first level floor, second level, and a third level. Right after, usually part of the early part of that year, federal government started renovating the third level parking lot into one of the largest nuclear bomb shelters in New Mexico. And look at how many people were getting into the downstairs. Now, those people consisted of all the hierarchy of the base, hierarchy of the police department, fire department, and UNM. Last, I think it was around Thanksgiving last year, I had the opportunity of interviewing a 96-year-old former dean of English at UNM. That's literary types, you know, we like to talk. And boy, the information I found is the west side, all the west side, nothing but porta-johns. Over there in the corner, far opposite corner, were cafeterias. Over there in this corner, banks of televisions. And so when we finally went our own ways, he told me that the only memory he has left of that place was the combination of the aromas between the porta-johns and the cafeterias. Oh, I can't blame him. But, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the place has been renovated lately, and they completely leveled. There's no sign of that ground level Montgomery Ward's anymore. But the second and third level, still there, renovated into parking lots. So, if you guys want to take a little slight excursion, they'll let you go down, then down to the third level. Just sort of drive around and scope it out. And then when you do get down there, shout out, hey, hey. You'll enjoy it. I do that all the time. But go there, go there. We're back at the Western Skies. December 18th, 1962. Guess who partied in town? These three guys. He was coming back from being the only president at the time to ever visit Los Alamos nuclear labs. He was halfway back when he gets a phone call from his buddy, his Hollywood buddy. Hey Jack, let's party tonight. I'm in town. They had already been over at the Western Skies, so they decided to party that night. And en route, so Kennedy had to change his plans. He asked his chauffeur if he knew how to get to where he was going to go. Said yes. And but by that time, you get a note. This was before I-40 and I-25. And so the only way to get where they were coming from was to enter onto 4th Street at Route 66. So next thing you know, he's driving east up Route 66, and that's where a lot of people have memories of waving at Kennedy going up the road, is up and down Central / Route 66. By the time they got to the other side, to Tramway, Kennedy asked his chauffeur, now we just went down the center of your town, is that correct? Yes, sir. Now this is Route 66, right? Yes, sir. But is that the center of your town? Yes, sir. Well, maybe you should rethink about naming the street Central. And a year and a half later, in his honor, they did. Official. No longer Route 66. Next. Okay, how many of you seen this motel at Alvarado and Central? It's been there since the mid-60s. Why is it there? If you don't know, you're about to learn. That was built by a fellow who had just got a pocket full of money from Hollywood. Because Hollywood did a movie of his World War II story. The Battle of Saipan, South Pacific. There was a fellow who was from Albuquerque who got awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor because he was directly responsible for the Japanese to surrender. He personally marched in 800 Japanese civilians and soldiers into captivity, thereby surrendering Saipan once and for all. And so for such a thing, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Well, next thing you know is Hollywood starts calling. And they haggle, they negotiate. And next thing you know is they're making a movie of it. Well, you got to remember that at that time, the movie finally came out in 1963. The guy who was to play him was a 6'5", handsome Hollywood type. And in the movie, they named him, the character's name was Guy Gabaldon. Guy Gabaldon. In reality, the fellow's name was Guy Gabaldon. And with the money that he earned, and he was a 5'9" Mexican. And well, they made the movie. He got paid, and what was the first thing he did? He built a motel right on the hottest spot in Albuquerque, Route 66, and right in the middle of Route 66, between San Pedro and San Mateo, right at the street of Alvarado in Central. So drive by, you'll still see today the bones of Albuquerque hang out there. Back then, it was in its prime. Built in 1957, leveled in 1988. How many shows did you guys catch there?
100 of them.
I caught, show you how old I am, a fellow by the name of John Denver. Oh, Cheech and Chong, I really liked you.
We had our wedding dance there.
Oh, really?
We did.
And as such, that was one of my favorite hangouts. And also, what was that place famous for every Sunday night?
Wrestling. Mike London.
Right on, Mike London. Did you know that his Sunday night shows are nationally televised? Direct from Albuquerque. Did you know that? Albuquerque was a mainstay, and those shows continued until he died at 80 years old.
What about Fletcher's, Ricky Romero?
Yes.
The Funk Brothers. Oh yeah.
Patsy Gringo.
Todo. Okay. You remember this, come on. What was the name of the movie? Come on, don't you know? Now, of course, part of it was shot here in Albuquerque. This guy was in it. His very first movie. His very first. Shot here. What do you think of Indianapolis, huh? There they are. That's Jack Nicholson right there. Peter Fonda. I can see that photo kicking the butt. Okay, guys. You've all heard campus. Anti-Vietnam War riot. Raise your hand if you haven't. 1970 was the worst riot, the anti-Vietnam War riot in New Mexico history. And May 3rd, 1970. And soon these guys would fix their bayonets, and tear gas would flow over the whole place. And one of the common memories of the rioters that were there was how a particular singer would, because the stage was right outside the Student Union Ballroom, okay? It was all outside. And they started playing music that would bounce off the walls in high volume. And the one singer they all remembered was a fellow that was singing, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky." Who was that? Jimi Hendrix, come on. You're not that old, buddy. And on June 17th, only 2 weeks after that, Jimi Hendrix performed there. Can you believe that? Only 2 weeks after the concert. But what I'm still trying to figure out, the thinking of the superpowers is, 2 months later, Janice goes. 6 months later, Jim goes. The 3 J's all kick the bucket. at the age of 27. I don't know why. Next. Ladies, April 19th, 1972, Tingley Coliseum. And I was there. Forgive me, but I forgot the name of the lady I was with. Come on. 50 years ago, what can I say? But we got stuck on the opposite end of where the stage was. And so it was her idea, so we can get closer, hand over hand over hand, all the way down the side of Tingley. We got the best views right on the side of the stage. And so there he was performing, and of course the women were screaming. I don't care where they were screaming. And all the guys were going, hi. And all you could tell is as we were on the side of the stage, finally he finishes his show, but all is screaming for the second time around, right? So he goes backstage, and there's only one guy back there, the stage manager. And so he helps them all with a fresh tunic and a fresh napkin. He goes out for a second encore, and he ends up throwing that to the women over there. And they're all screaming. They're back 10, 20 rows. They were, Ellen, Ellen, Ellen. And so, but he keeps on going, and he kills. And so pretty soon, he leaves the stage. And the backstage managers are prepared for another fresh tunic, puts that on, and another fresh around him. He goes out and throws that napkin to the women over there. And of course they scream out and gee, come on. But he did a good show. Finally he leaves for the third time. Everybody's hoping for a third encore. He just keeps on going backstage, back there, down the steps to a black waiting limo. And that limo just takes off. And all you know is that poor guy backstage, the women, Elvis, Elvis. He was really worried that they were going to swamp him for some reason. So he just goes up to the microphone and says, the only thing that could come to his mind at the time, Elvis has left the building. Over the years, I always thought that Albuquerque is where that saying started. I always thought that. Next one. Ladies and gentlemen, you know who this is? May 1973. Harrison Jack Schmidt, Albuquerque. Of course, when he got out of finished with NASA, he ran for U.S. Senate, and he won. I wanted a job as a kid. I needed a job, so I went to go apply. He gave me a nice interview. I didn't get the job, but I did when I shook his hand. How many of you have ever shook the hand of a man who's walked the moon? All right. Aren't we proud? I'm very proud of that. And so, I'm not going to brag more. Next. Lois Duncan, 1979. Being a literary type that I am, I have to talk about her. 1979. New York best-selling for her book, Killing Mr. Griffin. And the reason why I gotta bring that up, Leva, Danny, we're all Del Norte High grads, ladies and gentlemen, but a couple of students that kill a Del Norte High School teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, next. That's my credits. Give them a round of applause. Now, give me with questions. Lights up.
Okay.
Hit me with questions, folks. Yes, sir.
You mentioned about biplane and a single wing plane. What is the difference? Can you talk?
Okay, all of us have seen the World War I biplanes, dual wings. When that went in old fashion, starting in the 20s, they started working on single wing planes. And that was brought to Albuquerque. More questions? Yes,
Do
sir.
you know why they knocked down the Civic Auditorium? What was it?
Yes,
What was it?
because the doctors the Doctors Hospital for Hearts paid enough to merit to the city to knock it down. Does that answer that question? So today it's a heart hospital. Yes, any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Were there any students injured at UNM when they protested?
Yeah, 11 of them were hospitalized from bayonet wounds to tear gas. No deaths. Yes, sir.
Why do you have two N's in your name?
Thank you. That's theatrical types, you know, what can I tell you? You know, in my time, I produced theatrical musicals, comedy clubs, radio shows. It's my theatrical senses, what can I tell you? Yes. Yes, sir.
Why was the Alvarado Hotel torn down?
Why or when?
Both.
It was torn down in 1970. It shut down in 1965, and they said they were just too old and dilapidated. But they, in 1965, 1970, they did not have the mentality of rejuvenation like they do today. If it was today, there's still a lot of investors out there would kill to renovate that place. But no.
Can I add something?
Yes, sir.
All over the country, to save historical things, you need a champion that pushes on the politicians, that pushes on everybody. Save it, don't knock it down. The person who saved these rail yards from being knocked down is standing over there.
Oh, thank you.
Just leave it free.
It's a lot of help, so thank you.
If it weren't for you, this would all be vacant lot.
Well, specifically, it would be a soccer stadium by now. Yes, sir.
Is it true that when they built the Windrock Center and the Cornell Center, that's what killed downtown?
Yes,
It's true that.
because all the traffic was, and all the new residences were up in the heights. And so going downtown was, why bother? And so that's what helped kill downtown. Who else has a question? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ronn Perea. Did you have a good time? How it came down? I'm here. Otherwise, go catch the museum. It's a great place. Thank you.
One more question. Do you have your book?
Although I should say, thank you. Plenty of room left.
Do you have your books here? Ron, do you have your books here?
Right there.
All right, okay.
Anybody's interested, I'm here.
Thanks a million for coming. Please see the museum if you have anything you want to talk to me about or questions or anything, I'm here as well.